Welcome, everybody, to the Black Hole. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Frank von Hippel. He's a professor at Princeton University. He is a theoretical physicist who has decided to use his time on better things. And I think he could be most accurately described as a citizen scientist now. He spent the last several decades of his life worrying about issues of peace and security and looking at this from a technical, scientific point of view using his knowledge of physics. He was an advisor to President Clinton back in the 1990s. And that is the time that the Soviet Union had just disintegrated. And the question was what to do with the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons. So he was an advisor to President Clinton, but also to Mikhail Gorbachev at that time. He has received several awards, and you will see that he is intensely concerned about what's happening in the United States. He remains very actively engaged, both in issues of arms control, matters of peace and security, and with what matters to people in the US. So now you will get to see him as I pull this screen down, and it'll take just a little while for the projector to warm up. Since he is just about to come, and we are just going to see him. There he is. And now, just as we can see him, he can see us as well.
Yeah.
Frank, it's wonderful having you here. Thank you very much for agreeing to be here. We are, of course, going to talk about Iran and nuclear weapons, but before we enter into that, I want to ask a related question, go on a slightly different trajectory. You were engaged with Gorbachev at the time that the Soviet Union broke up, was about to break up, and you advised him on what to do with Soviet nuclear weapons. And among the things that you did was how to deal with Ukraine. Now, Ukraine did give up its nuclear weapons. It had something, if I remember right, between 2,000 and 2,500 nuclear weapons and lots of ballistic missiles. And these were, of course, aimed at the United States. And you, your colleagues, the US government persuaded Ukraine to give them up in exchange for guarantees. And so then we see that 4 years ago, Ukraine gets invaded by Russia. So looking back at that period of your life, how do you feel about what Ukraine did? Should it have acted differently? How does it fit into your whole career as a person who wants to do away with nuclear weapons?
Well, I think the agreement that was made, there was an agreement made under which the US, UK, and Russia committed, if anybody infringed on Ukraine's sovereignty, they would take the issue to the Security Council of the UN. Well, that was an empty commitment, and I think Ukraine should have understood that, because any permanent member of the Security Council, which includes Russia, can veto an action by the Security Council. So basically, I was not involved in these negotiations in the Clinton administration, but in retrospect, it's obvious that the country should have individually made commitments to come to Ukraine's defense if it was attacked. So it was an empty promise, since in fact foreseeably the only threat to Ukraine would have been from Russia. Now the question is, the other question which has been debated is whether Ukraine should have kept its nuclear weapons. And early on, I actually got only involved as part of an NGO group which went to Kiev and to urge the Ukrainians to get rid of their nuclear weapons and actually get compensated for the highly enriched uranium, the value of the highly enriched uranium in them. That highly enriched uranium was later blended down to low enriched uranium and sold to U.S. nuclear utilities as fuel. But at that point on this, the tactical nuclear weapons, Ukraine had both strategic nuclear weapons on intercontinental ballistic missiles and bombs for long range bombers. But in addition, it had these tactical nuclear weapons, short range missiles, and things that were originally developed in case there was a war in Europe, between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. And so those were drawn with, and those included artillery shells, which are actually nuclear bombs made into artillery shells, and they were withdrawn pretty early. The process of and I think probably the bombs were as well, and the bombers. So what was left pretty quickly were these long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, and there. I don't think they would have been much use to Ukraine. I guess you really have to control them, and they were really controlled from Moscow, and so. And you would have had to shoot them almost straight up, I think, to have them come down on Russia. So I don't know the details of that, but it looked like all the technical backup for the targeting of those missiles and was in Russia, as was the maintenance of the warheads. So, my view is nuclear weapons are unusable, and so what really Ukraine needed was guarantees of conventional backup, and it did get some backup. It has gotten some backup, not in personnel, but in terms of weapons from NATO and the United States, and which enabled them. And what interestingly enough. We're talking about tactical nuclear weapons. Tactical nuclear weapons are obsolete now because they were originally developed to target Soviet tanks coming across the inter-German border, developed on the U.S. side. But then we now have precision-guided munitions. You don't have to blow up a whole country to destroy tanks, and the Ukrainians showed that especially with the Javelin, the shoulder-launched homing conventional missile, which you actually put the image of the tank, on the screen, and then the the munition has its own little television, and it then fixes on that tank and attacks it. So and Ukraine, you may recall that early in the war, in the invasion, Ukraine drove back Russia out of most of Ukraine, and I think the Javelin was the key to that, and those weapons were supplied. There was a controversy where Trump, was originally impeached for a telephone call that he made to Zelensky, and where he conditioned supplying these munitions to Zelensky on Zelensky going after accusing Biden's son of corruption. So, but the Congress forced the delivery of those javelins, and they were critical to the original defense of Ukraine. Now, a real security commitment, would have included personnel from the U.S., and that was not provided.
Okay, good. So your contention is that tactical nuclear weapons would not have been very useful, and they would not have been used. They're not good for war fighting. And in particular, I do remember that a calculation was carried out. What would be the effect of a nuclear weapon on formation of incoming tanks, enemy tanks? And maybe they'll blow up 5, 7, 10, not more than that, because you can always disperse the tanks, and it takes a huge amount of blast power to actually do any damage to the tank. But so that point is fair enough. But now our main point of discussion today is Iran. Would you like to walk us through the history of the Iranian nuclear program, looked at it from Washington?
Yes. And by the way, I was involved in to some extent on the in feeding in ideas to the negotiations of the Obama administration's deal with Iran. Now, the Iranian nuclear program actually started under the Shah. And the Shah was an ally, the Shah of Iran, who was overthrown by the 1979 revolution. The Shah was an ally of the U.S. He was, I think, to some extent, he was considered a policeman of the Middle East for the United States, and the U.S. encouraged him to launch a very big nuclear energy program. The Shah was also interested in nuclear weapons, but the U.S. did not worry much about that, didn't mind that, as long as it was the Shah. Then he was overthrown, and the Islamic Republic that succeeded the Shah had little interest in nuclear power, but later, after being invaded by Saddam Hussein, and who was backed by the U.S., including in very distasteful ways, including facilitating the chemical weapons attacks that Saddam Hussein made on the Iranians. The Iranians came out of that war and with an interest in nuclear energy, perhaps also, I think, also in nuclear weapons, and they started with a partially built nuclear power plant that had been built by the Germans But then after the 1979 revolution, the U.S. pressed Germany to withdraw from that, and ultimately was Russia that agreed to complete that. This is the Boucher, the first reactor Boucher. A second one is being built also by Russia. Then there was a question of the fuel, and the Shah had invested in France's enrichment complex. He was a part owner of France's enrichment complex to obtain enrichment services. And the U.S. or the French, I don't know what combination, decided not to fulfill that deal. So how was Iran to get enrichment services? Well, it turned out Russia supplied them. Has made a contract to supply fuel for the Boucher reactor and any other reactors that are built in Iran. But Iran, I think wanted a nuclear weapons option, and therefore decided to acquire an enrichment program, and then also built a research reactor, very much like the research reactor that India used to acquire the plutonium for its first nuclear weapon.
And like the one that we have in Islamabad, which is about 20 miles from here. That's a research reactor of the same type, CANDU. Not CANDU, but this is a research reactor that actually uses highly enriched uranium. And it was used for research purposes, but that's not how we got our bomb.
Right. No, the Indian reactor was fueled with natural uranium, and that was the plan for the Iranian reactor, the so-called Arak, A-R-A-K reactor, and so in 2002, I think it was. Iran built these facilities, its first enrichment plant and its reactor, without informing the IAEA. And there was a big issue about whether they were required. They insisted that they weren't required to do that. The IAEA insisted that they were, but in any case, there was a dissident group of Iranian allies, probably working with Israel, who made public the programs that Iran was engaged in I think it was 2003, and so then that became an issue, in between 2003 and 2005, there were negotiations between the U.S. The Bush administration refused to negotiate with Iran, and so the negotiations were by Germany, France, and the UK, with the Bush administration talking into the ear of the UK, and the Bush administration was insisting that there be zero enrichment in Iran. This is something that the Trump administration has come back to periodically, and Iran was unwilling to go have zero. They wanted to have at least a token amount of enrichment capability, and so in Iran, the politics. There's this overall, in overall authority, it's the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, but they have an elected government in parallel, and the elected government has switched back and forth between liberals and hardliners. And in 2005, a hardliner was elected, and he cut off the negotiations and said full speed ahead for the enrichment program. And so Iran built and up it, continued to work on the research reactor, which was later abandoned, but continued, and the focus was really primarily on the enrichment program. So Iran built up its enrichment program, and then in 2008, 9, the Obama administration came in. The Obama administration was interested in negotiation, but its first Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, was somewhat of a hardliner herself, and nothing much happened until Obama's second term, when John Kerry became the Secretary of State, and he was very interested in negotiating, and in fact, we had one of the diplomats who had been part of the negotiations with the Europeans between 2003 and 2005, Hossein Mousavian, became quite pivotal. He had to leave Iran because he got crosswise with the President Ahmadinejad, which is a funny story. I can just tell you briefly. Ahmadinejad, obviously I'm struggling a little bit with his name.
Ahmadinejad.
Pardon?
Ahmadinejad.
Okay. Anyway, he asked Mousavian to be his foreign minister, and Mousavian's response was, "Well, that wouldn't work because I disagree with you about everything." And then that got Mousavian briefly into jail and into trouble, and he was advised after Ahmadinejad was reelected to leave the country for his own safety, and he came to Princeton, and so became and stayed here, and in fact he's here still now, although he's retired, still working on this issue. So anyway, Mousavian actually briefed then Senator Kerry before he became Secretary of State on the possibilities of negotiations, and became a continuing during the negotiation an advisor to both sides, both people under Kerry and also Javad Zarif, who was the Iranian foreign minister, who had also been a negotiator with Mousavian, with the Europeans, and also the Rouhani, the president of who I'm jumping ahead, and I think it was in 2013 that Rouhani, one of the three negotiators with the Europeans, became president, was elected president, and so now you had people on both sides who were serious about negotiating. So they negotiated the Iran deal, which left Iran with a token enrichment capacity, but very strictly limited. 5,000 first-generation centrifuges, limited to enriching only up to 3.7%, which is the level used in the Bushehr reactor, and requirement to export that to Russia to be used Russia was providing the fuel with no accumulation, because of course the accumulating that would is going from 0 to even it's nonlinear. From 0 to 3.7% is, I forget, about halfway to weapons grade, which is 90%, because basically you can think of the enrichment process as involving getting rid of the U-238 diluent in natural uranium. Natural uranium is 0.7% U-235. And so you've gotten rid of most of the U-238 already when you get up to 3.7%. So anyway, that was the deal, and that deal lasted until President Trump was elected, and then in 2018, and President Trump didn't like President Obama, and wanted to show that he could do everything better than Obama. And so what he did is he took the U.S. out of the deal. The deal involved, on the U.S. side, suspending the sanctions. The U.S. had put enormous pressure on Iran's economy with sanctions, including secondary sanctions, that is, forcing companies in other countries not to do business with Iran on penalty of being sanctioned themselves by the U.S.
Frank,
So
is there any evidence that it was Israel which wanted that agreement, the JCPOA, scrapped, or is it just a matter of speculation?
I think it's a matter of speculation, but certainly Israel, Netanyahu specifically, was very much against any enrichment in Iran, even this level. And they had, and they were able to provide evidence that Iran had, before 2003, had also a nuclear weapons design program. And then in 2003, after it became public, the Ayatollah declared that it was forbidden to have a nuclear weapons program, and all our evidence is that it stopped at that point. And in fact, as late as last year, the U.S. government was convinced that there was no ongoing Iranian nuclear weapons program.
So then it seems a little curious that Iran, on the one hand, has fatwa against the making of nuclear weapons. On the other hand, it is pursuing enrichment, and as you'll tell us surely, it has about 600 kilograms of 60% uranium, which is more than enough for 10 to 15 bombs, and which just needs one centrifugation step more. So there's this disconnect over there, which is,
good.
Yeah, they want the option. At the same time, they're saying they're not building that. That's been a feature of Iranian state policy. In your mind, why is Iran willing to put its security at risk by pursuing this dual, this double-edged policy?
I think they do want to have a nuclear weapons option, and they feel that provides some kind of they thought that provided some level of deterrence. Now the fatwa against nuclear weapons died with the Ayatollah. So who was killed by the Israel in February, I guess, and so we don't know whether the new regime in Iran wants to go all out with a bomb. But I do think that Israel, of course, is a nuclear armed state, even though it treats that as a secret. It's forbidden to discuss that in Israel. And so Iran is confronted with a nuclear armed enemy, which we've seen recently has been bombing Iran with impunity because of its technological superiority with regard to aircraft, especially. That's my speculation that Iran, that there was a compromise reached within the Iranian leadership, and the compromise was that they would keep this latent. They wouldn't proceed with the weaponization, but they would keep this latent capability.
What is the current assessment of the Iranian enrichment program? Where do you think the 600 kilograms of 60% uranium physically exist? And here is something that we'd really like to know. In what form would that 600 kilograms be? Is it in the form of gas cylinders, or has it been converted into metal?
Yeah, when last seen by the IAEA, I think it's actually 440 kilograms of uranium
yes, I think you're
in
right.
The form of uranium hexafluoride, and uranium hexafluoride is sort of it's actually sort of between liquid and gaseous state. It's in a pretty high density form in these cylinders, and when there was a picture which has been much discussed, a satellite image of a truck with blue cylinders on its back outside a tunnel near Isfahan, and so it's believed that most of the uranium hexafluoride is in that tunnel, which I think the Iranians blocked the entrance, filled in the entrance, so it would. And it may have been bombed as well, so it would have to be dug out. And I'm sure that site is being very heavily watched, and so it's believed that it's still there. It has not been dug out yet. But as you say, well, you could actually make. And by the way, why did Iran do this? I think that was their way of ramping up pressure on the U.S. To come back into some kind of deal where sanctions would be lifted. And they were saying, look at, we're telling you, we're being open about this. We're making this 60% stuff. We know you don't like it. If you raise the sanctions, we'll get rid of it again. They offered that in the negotiations that Israel twice broke off by bombing, interrupted by bombing, last June and in February.
In your personal assessment, how important do you think Iran's potential nuclear weapons play in the conduct of this war? In fact, in the launching of this war, was it really about nuclear weapons, or was it about other things? The fact that Iran is the only force in the Middle East that's effectively countering Israeli expansion into Arab lands.
Yeah, I don't understand to what extent Israel is expansionist. They're definitely, obviously, trying to drive the Palestinians out of the West Bank, and now they've occupied a piece of Lebanon. But I just wanted to go back briefly to the enriched uranium. The 60% enriched uranium could be made anything above actually 10% can be made into a nuclear explosive. But it would be a large, very, very big object. Iran has designed, when the weapons program was underway, there was a very special a warhead was being designed, and that missile required the enrichment to go all the way up to 90%. So the Iranians could drive a bomb made with 60% enrichment with a truck or something, and blow it up someplace. But in terms of actually threatening Israel with a missile, a nuclear-armed missile, they would require going to 90%. But remind me of your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the question was really the extent to which nuclear weapons have driven U.S. policy towards Iran.
Yeah. U.S. policy toward Iran, I think, has been driven primarily by nuclear weapons, but except to the extent that U.S. policy has been driven by Israel, which has been very influential, especially on the Trump administration. And you're right that Israel has a broader agenda with Iran, and Iran has been supporting the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthis, all of which are very anti-Israel. So I think Israel, has had a real security threat from Iran, but the focusing and the way for them to get the U.S. to join them has been really, however, to focus on the nuclear weapons program.
Okay, before we turn to the audience, I want to ask you about the extent to which Pakistan has been useful to Iran. Certainly, the P1 centrifuges that were whose design was brought by Dr. A.Q. Khan and then reverse engineered here in Kahuta, which is about, by the way, something like 30 miles from here. Those designs were then shared with the Iranians, and that's not a secret anymore. In fact, A.Q. Khan admitted to that in January of 2004 on public television here. He was forced to by General Musharraf. But then later on, it came to be known, very well known, that the design for the bomb, which Pakistan had received from China, had been shared with Libya and with Iran. So,
Right.
Do you know anything that has been of substance which the Iranians have gained as a result of collaboration with A.Q. Khan? We do know that the Iranians were able to develop much better centrifuges than the one that A.Q. Khan provided, and that they have SWUs which are far in advance of the P1. But beyond that,
Right.
do you have any knowledge of the extent that Pakistan has been helpful to Iran on the nuclear issue?
No, I don't. But I did want to add before we go to questions, I just wanted to add one more thing to Saudi Arabia has wants a nuclear program, and Saudi Arabia, and they said that that if Iran got nuclear weapons, they would get nuclear weapons. However, the Trump administration has been treating Saudi Arabia very differently from Iran, and in fact this would have to be approved by Congress, but they have agreed that Saudi Arabia can both enrich and reprocess, that is, separate out plutonium out of the spent fuel from nuclear reactors. So that would so a very different attitude toward Saudi Arabia's interest in having a nuclear weapons option than toward Iran's. And then there's also Turkey and Egypt, which are also. I think that if there could be a real proliferation storm in the Middle East, and Turkey most recently has said that it wants to have a nuclear-powered attack submarine. Well, the question then is, where would they get the fuel? And I think the obvious thing is they would say that we have to produce it ourselves. It's a security issue, and so then and Egypt has always had some interest. Is always worried about proliferation somewhat. So you have a potential proliferation explosion in the Middle East. And I just wanted to say in terms of the solution of this problem, what we've been advocating for a long time at Princeton has been a multinational enrichment. We don't think that any of these there's no reason for new enrichment capacity globally at this time. The expectations for the expansion of nuclear power were much too optimistic, and so there's an overcapacity. The price of enrichment has gone down to at least before the Ukrainian war. I haven't kept track of it recently. Went down to just the operating costs of the big enrichment companies, which are Russia, France, China, and Urenco. Urenco is a multinational. It's owned by Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK. And but we've been arguing that if these countries want enrichment capacity, and this leaves out the Turkish issue of wanting a national capacity for their attack submarine. But if they want enrichment for nuclear power plants, and they insist on building enrichment capacity, they should do it multinationally, so they could watch each other, and which was one of the motivations, by the way, for the Urenco multinational. There was concern at the time, in the 70s still, about Germany acquiring a nuclear weapons option, and so I think that was one of the motivations. So Iran has actually accepted our idea, but with one caveat, that the enrichment has to be in Iran, or at least some of the enrichment. And certainly in the case of Urenco, all three of the parties, the Netherlands, Germany, and the UK, have big enrichment complexes, but they keep an eye on each other. So that certainly would be better than what the situation we're looking at, where you would have a proliferation of national enrichment plants in the Middle East.
So if the United States has given the go-ahead to Saudi Arabia to process its spent fuel and extract the plutonium, that's an invitation really to making the bomb, isn't it? because
It is. And of course, this has to be approved by Congress, and this Congress has been approving anything the Trump administration wants. Maybe things may change hopefully things will change after the November election. But I wanted to add one thing, which on the Saudi situation. Another thing that the Trump administration has agreed to with Saudi Arabia, and again, as I say, this hasn't been approved by the Congress, is that Saudi Arabia will not have to sign up to the so-called additional protocol, which gives the IAEA. It was after Iraq's nuclear weapons program was discovered. The IAEA then was given additional authority to go to places where there is no nuclear material, but there are nuclear-related activities. And so the Trump administration is told to, and 140 countries, I think, have signed up to this additional protocol now. But the Trump administration has said to Saudi Arabia, you don't have to sign the additional protocol, which is a very, a terrible precedent.
And which Iran has signed and got bombed in spite of that.
Iran has complied with the additional protocol and said, and as part of the deal, the JCPOA, the Obama deal, they said they would ratify the additional protocol, but I don't know whether they actually have at this point. They have been behaving as if they were.
I think they have signed, but anyway, we can confirm later. What are the conditions on UAE? Because UAE has 4 nuclear reactors, and just when Bushehr was bombed, and it was bombed 4 times in the 6-week war. Of course, the Americans and the Israelis didn't aim for the containment dome. They wanted to drive the Russians out, and the Russians have left. But the UAE is just across the Gulf, and if those nuclear reactors are made targets, and they can easily be made targets by missiles, which can breach the containment dome. So these are really bombs which are planted in another country's territory.
And I think actually the reason that Israel did not develop nuclear power plants was because it worried about them as a target. But just on UAE is a very interesting story. UAE is the furthest ahead in the Middle East in nuclear power. They have 4 operating nuclear power plants built by South Korea. And the US, under another administration, required the UAE, I think the South Korean reactors actually the US had a veto over them because they evolved out of US designed reactors. And so as a condition of the UAE building these reactors, the US required the UAE to not acquire either enrichment or reprocessing capacity. It's called the gold standard, but there was also a condition that the UAE put in that agreement, is that if the U.S. gave another country in the region permission to enrich or reprocess, then the UAE could do so as well. So the U.S. agreeing with Saudi Arabia would release allowing Saudi Arabia to enrich and actually probably the U.S. would, I don't know, but my guess is the U.S. would provide the centrifuges to Saudi Arabia. That would unleash the UAE to develop their own enrichment and reprocessing program, and so adding to the proliferation potential.
Okay, so now I think we need to turn to the audience. Nair first. Here.
Hi, Frank. Thank you. On here? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much, Frank. Very clear, very nice, informative. We hear that the Iran was very unhappy that JCPO was not complied upon by the powers which actually did not remove the sanctions against Iran. And I think that was perhaps the reason that Iran went back to larger enrichment. That's one point that I wanted to ask. But there was another episode in the world where USA again went back on its commitment. That was in North Korea, wasn't it? When North Korea was promised reactors, where if it were to to undo this Yongbong reactor, it did try to, and then when the promise was not made, then North Korea then went back and reprocessed the plutonium and made the bomb, and now it is the 9th nuclear power. So is that something that is true in both the cases, that USA went back on its promises?
Yes, it's a problem with I talked about the Iranian oscillation between liberals and hardliners. Well, we also have that problem in the U.S. The deal with North Korea was made under the Clinton administration. Actually, it was a key figure was Jimmy Carter, who was invited to North Korea and just and actually made a deal without any authority from the Clinton administration. An ex-president basically negotiated, but then the Clinton administration accepted that and built on it. And the deal was that in exchange for North Korea shutting down its own nuclear reactor program, and at that time we didn't know about the enrichment program in North Korea, so it was focused on the plutonium route to the bomb. In exchange for them shutting down the graphite reactors that they were building, which can be fueled by natural uranium, and their plutonium, was produced by that route. The U.S. would provide nuclear power plants. U.S. It turned out to be South Korea would provide nuclear power plants, and until the power plants were operating, the U.S. would supply oil to fuel the electrical power plants in North Korea. Well, the Congress wasn't enthusiastic about that, and then when the Bush administration came in, the Bush Jr. administration, they basically canceled it. This agreement, and their basis was, in fact, turned out to be correct, that North Korea was working on the centrifuge. It was building a centrifuge program, and thereby another route to the bomb. But instead of, I would have much preferred that the Bush administration had negotiated with the North Koreans about their centrifuge program and tried to shut that down. But instead of that, the Bush administration used that as an excuse to end that agreement, the Clinton agreement with North Korea. The Vice President Cheney famously said, "We don't negotiate with evil." I mean, the Bush administration after 9/11 had described the axis of evil, including North Korea, Iran, and Iraq, that were U.S. enemies.
Is there any tangible evidence that the Pakistani centrifuge program was beneficial to North Korea's?
I think so. I think there was. You may know better than I, but I think there was an exchange between Pakistan and this may not have been a private operation by A.Q. Khan. It may have been actually Mrs. Bhutto may have been involved, where there was an exchange of North Korean missile technology for Pakistani centrifuge technology.
Nair has a follow-up question.
Frank, was this about JCPO? Was there a violation of JCPO by USA that made Iran go back on enrichment?
But JCPO was cancelled by Trump. It was torn up, thrown away.
Yeah, during the first term. Yeah, and then
2018. 2018.
There is a question of whether the U.S., even under the Obama administration, was completely complying with the sanctions lifting. But I don't know the specifics on that. But it was Trump in 2018 that who canceled the agreement and went back to full out maximum sanctions on Iran, economic sanctions on Iran, both direct and, more importantly, indirect, by the so-called secondary sanctions on companies in other countries that were doing business with Iran. And Iran, the results economically for Iran have been catastrophic of those sanctions.
Okay. Very nice talk, Doctor. Thank you very much. We have spoken about the Korean and Pakistani and Saudi and Egyptian and Turkey nuclear programs, but we missed out on the elephant in the room, Israel.
I'm sorry, on the what?
We missed out on the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Which is Israel, who was the first one to introduce nuclear weapons to this area. Don't you think that the proper way of getting rid of nuclear aspirations in this region is to take the bomb out of Israel, which the US doesn't want to do at all?
Yes, there has been I think both Iran and Egypt were pushing for a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East, which would require Israel to get rid of its nuclear weapons. Israel, and there were briefly sort of negotiations. I think it was under the Bush administration about the conditions under which Israel would get rid of its nuclear weapons, and there's been pressure at the UN, and especially right now we're in every 5 years there's a conference on the Non-Proliferation Treaty, a review conference, and right now actually it's going on at the UN, and there's been pressure, and the Israeli nuclear weapons program has been an issue in those conferences in the past, and one result was that there would be a meeting, annual meeting, to discuss a nuclear weapons-free Middle East. The Israel and the has not been very cooperative with those. I don't think it's attended, and the U.S. I'm not sure whether it's attended or not, but it's been it's really been aligned with Israel in terms of in terms of not putting pressure on Israel in this regard. So it is there are a number of nuclear weapons-free zones. I think about half the countries in the world belong to nuclear weapons-free zones, in all of Africa, all of South America, and the South Pacific, and now we have something, a movement called for a treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons, and about 100 countries have signed that treaty. So there is pressure, international pressure, to outside the non-proliferation treaty, for the nuclear weapon states to fulfill their commitment under the non-proliferation treaty to get rid of their weapons. Of course, Israel, India, and Pakistan and North Korea are outside the non-proliferation treaty. It's the first five nuclear weapon states, which are also the original and the permanent members of the UN Security Council, agreed, however, that they would get on with nuclear disarmament if the other countries in the world signed up not to acquire nuclear weapons, and so that's a perennial issue, and I think we should get on the nuclear weapon states, and the official nuclear weapon states, the 5 plus the 4 that are outside the non-proliferation treaty, should get on with nuclear disarmament. It's an existential threat to humanity, I think it's possible. I mean, in the case of Pakistan, I think we mentioned that if there was a war between Pakistan and India, the precision-guided munitions would be would be an alternative to battlefield nuclear weapons.
Professor, can you hear me? Yeah, Professor.
Yes.
I mean, as an overseas Pakistani who's come back to Pakistan, I have a statement to make, but I would like to ask you a very specific question, because your CV says that you are on global security. So it behooves me to say that people like you who've dealt at the highest level do have an input on global security. So someone said that war is older men talking and younger men dying. And that has been the case for a long time. And I think it's still the case. I'm concerned about my own country, Pakistan. And I know that Dr. Hoodbhoy has got the Iran angle here. And obviously, Iran and Pakistan are joined at the hip ethnically and culturally and all that. So my first question is, and if you can just extrapolate on that in a little bit of detail, my first question is that the elephant in the room, like the gentleman on my left said, is Israel. And in sitting in Pakistan, we think about Israel. We don't recognize Israel, but we ourselves have to protect our own people against threats to our own security. And when we talk about Egypt and Turkey and all these countries, I mean, all these countries are thinking the same way. But if you look at it in a bigger picture, this is called mutually aided destruction, the MAD philosophy. We can all be obliterated on this planet if we just think about ourselves. So I'd like you to comment, what is at least give us 3 steps how we as a developing country citizen sitting in the middle of the maelstrom here in the Middle East can do something significant to protect ourselves. But the other thing has to do with Israel, which just wants its own protection and doesn't give a hoot about others. And there are certain conspiracy theories about the greater Israel and this and that. I won't get into that, but can you comment on how Pakistanis, the average Pakistani, can, we're not a war-loving country. We want peace also, but we have to protect ourselves. So is it possible that we could be the next target to be denuked, so as to say, after Iran? And that is a question on a lot of people's minds. Thank you.
I didn't realize that that the concern extended to Pakistan from about Israel. I know that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have a have an alliance apparently, which includes the U.S. has extended over its allies something that's called the nuclear umbrella. That is, U.S. says that not only will we come to your defense, I mean, of course, all this is in doubt under Trump, who doesn't seem to believe in allies. But basically, the message in the past has been, we will come to your defense if you're attacked. And the source of the attack, has been either Russia or China, and including nuclear weapons, if need be. And this commitment has prevented. I mean, both Presidents Obama and President Biden were interested in having a no first use policy with nuclear weapons, and there was pressure, both from the Pentagon and from allies like Japan, saying, no, we want you to keep the nuclear option on the table, first use. At the same time, first Reagan and Gorbachev, and now all 5 of the so-called P5, the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, who are also the nuclear armed members of the Security Council, they committed as part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty to get on with nuclear disarmament. I think my own view is that nuclear weapons are an existential threat to humanity. Even the people in the southern hemisphere, which is basically nuclear weapons free, would be threatened by catastrophe if there was a nuclear war in the northern hemisphere. Both from economic and climate effects. So I do think that all of us, getting back to this, the Reagan Gorbachev mantra, it was the nuclear weapons. A nuclear war cannot be fought. No, a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. You would think that a corollary of that would be no first use. That you shouldn't start a nuclear war if it cannot be fought or it cannot be won and must not be fought. It would be disaster for everybody. But when the most recent repetition of that statement was by the P5, these 5 first nuclear weapon states. But then they went on and they said the only purpose of nuclear weapons is to prevent war, and that by implication actually brought in the necessity of first use. So I think we have to get, we have to start with the no first use issue. China has for a long time had a no first use policy. India, too. There are questions in both cases, but I think we have to have a real debate about no first use, and including in Pakistan. And I think I know that the Pakistan nuclear weapon is because of the threat, the perceived threat from India, but I think the precision guided munitions have actually made the nuclear deterrence obsolete, and Pakistan should focus on that.
There's just before we go to the next question, I want to comment that political alliances change in very strange ways. So just after General Ziaul Haq died, the next chief of army staff was Mirza Aslam Beg, who had this doctrine of strategic defiance. 3 countries would get together and protect each other with nuclear weapons if need be. They were Pakistan, which had the bomb, Iran, which was trying to make the bomb, and Afghanistan. And these 3 countries would then confront the West. Now, let's think about it. Would you like Afghanistan to have the bomb now? After all, we're in a state of war with Afghanistan. We've just bombed Kabul. They say that we've hit their prisons, their mental health institutions, their university. Whether true or not, but what if they had the bomb and they wanted to retaliate on Pakistan? So, all these things are very complicated. We who were to be with Iran in this strategic alliance, strategic defiance alliance, today we don't even think of sharing our bomb with Iran. Instead, the people who speculate on whether we might share them with Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia is our true ally in the thinking of the establishment.
Sir, thank you so much, Professor. 2 questions, small questions. One is very direct, so be mindful. A country who has used 2 times already atomic bombs can use 3rd time? And second question, the lesson that despite signing NPT, despite the leadership's repeated narrations that we are not interested, we will not make, you cannot save your soul from the most lethal weaponry and bombs over the months and hundreds of thousands of most lethal weapons on the planet. You cannot save your soul. So what is the lesson any country should get out of it?
Thank you. Well, we've been having a debate in the U.S. and it's almost the nuclear deterrence has become almost a religion in the security establishment in the U.S. That somehow the argument is that there has been no World War III. There were World War I and World War II were 20 years apart, but there has been no World War III since 1945, so 80 years now, and the nuclear people take credit for that. They say nuclear deterrence works. Well, and so that's the and that includes the threat of nuclear first use. So that's the debate that we're in about the future of nuclear weapons. I am concerned about the near misses that we've had, but the question is whether there is, I think for the people who want to get rid of nuclear weapons, like me, the challenge for us is whether the world has, whether it's nuclear weapons, nuclear deterrence that has prevented a World War III, or whether it's actually a number of other developments as well. I think the world has changed, and in fact, we have become interdependent. We've also become vulnerable in many ways. I mean, we have we have hacking, computer attacks. We've created vulnerabilities. Pervez mentioned that the UAE's nuclear power plants are potential targets for a conventional nuclear attack, and so an attacker could cause a Chernobyl in any country which has nuclear power plants. And Chernobyl was a tremendous shock to the Soviet Union. Gorbachev thought it was a major cause of the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the destabilization that resulted from Chernobyl. So that we have created vulnerabilities in the modern society. The question is, can we prevent a World War III without nuclear weapons? I think the argument should be made, and that countries no longer need nuclear deterrence. I mean, I agree that the U.S. started this by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki. My grandfather was part of the U.S. nuclear weapons project during World War II, and he and his colleagues argued against the use of. I mean, they joined the program to develop nuclear weapons because they feared that the Nazis had a nuclear weapons program, but by the time before Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and even before the end of World War II in Europe, before the defeat of Germany, which came before. Well before the defeat of Japan, we know that there was no German nuclear weapons program, and they argued, these scientists, including my grandfather, most notably Niels Bohr, actually went to both President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill. It was a UK-US program, nuclear weapons program, and they argued that if the US if Bohr and my grandfather and others argued that if the US made a secret decision without consulting the Soviet Union to use nuclear weapons against Japan, it would start a nuclear arms race with the Soviet Union, and of course it did, and that was in a way the original sin, which was committed by the U.S. and which has got us into all this mess.
We'll take two last questions.
Hello, Professor. My question is that you are saying that nuclear deterrence is no longer viable for the peace of the current world. But as we're seeing in the war between Iran, Israel, and America, and even Ukraine, those countries who don't have nuclear deterrence are being attacked at the will of the countries who have nuclear weapons. So it would. So should the U.S. argue against Iran having nuclear weapons, as the U.S. is supporting the country Israel, who is waging a war, which have fueled up the oil prices and the current uh, situation in current war? So are you saying that countries should destroy nuclear weapons, but the countries that do not have nuclear weapons are more vulnerable to external threats? So how would you comment on that?
I agree that in fact, and we've seen it. We've seen it with Russia invading Ukraine, and then using the threat of that this war could become nuclear if NATO supports Ukraine beyond a certain level. And we've now seen with Iran 2 nuclear weapon states attacking a non-nuclear weapon state. Well, if that wasn't that wouldn't be a reason for Iran to decide that no, we're going to go for nuclear weapons now. I don't know what would be, and I'm really worried that the fatwa against Iran acquiring nuclear weapons died with the Ayatollah, and I don't know what the new Ayatollah. We haven't heard any renewal of the fatwa from him. So it's the U.S. I think has, by the fact that it's a nuclear weapons power has felt emboldened to intervene in other countries by the fact that it has nuclear weapons, just as Russia was emboldened to attack Ukraine.
Last question.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। मेरे सवाल का या उसका पहला हिस्सा हूद भाई की तरफ मुतवज्जह होगा, जिसको किसी ने शायद सीरियसली नहीं नोट किया कि पाकिस्तान, ईरान और अफ़गानिस्तान अगर एटमी ताकत बन जाती तो क्या सूरत हाल या ख़तरा दुनिया को पेश आ जाता। फॉर्चुनेटली ईरान ने बना लिया, पाकिस्तान ने बना लिया है, ईरान फंसा हुआ है। और जहाँ तक आपके पड़ोस अफ़गानिस्तान का ताल्लुक़ है, आपकी मालूमात में ज़रूर होगा, अगर नहीं है तो ये सुनकर आपको खुश होना चाहिए कि अभी जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन वहाँ आई हुई है वो अभी तक इस मरहले में फंसी हुई है कि जदीद उलूम को पढ़ना जायज़ भी है या नहीं। तो ये पहली बात ख़त्म हो जाती है। द सेकेंड पार्ट ऑफ माई क्वेश्चन इज़ सर टू यू। Very interesting discussion from your side. Sir, the America become the watchdog or the policeman of the world politics and stopping nations from making nukes. Sir, it is a historical fact that America is the country that it has used or practiced the use of nuke twice, 6th August 1945 and 9th August 1945. And now they have become the policemen and stopping other nations from making nukes. Wouldn't it be advisable for America that giving the example of a noble or good child, first they get rid of all these nukes and then become a practical example for all the remaining nations or countries of the world? First portion of my comment. Second portion,
I think we need to limit this.
I'm 100% confirmed that America has no interest in Iran to get rid of its nuke. Sir, you know that the present Trump administration, they have changed the name of Defense Department into War Department. They have changed their Ministry of Defense into the Ministry of War. And when they announced after 39 days severely bombing Iran and then eventually signing a ceasefire on 8th April by announcing that they have achieved more than 90% of their goals, and 5 days, just 5 days ago, when Peter Hegseth was asked to go to Congress and answer the question of the congressman, when he was asked that you are confirmed that you have obliterated 90% capability, new capability of Iran, why are you interested in protracting the war? And his answer was that Iran is not giving up its nuclear ambitions. So and sir, you know that all other industries have severely suffered in America. Only war industry, it has profited for more than 50%, and now they are asking for a new budget of $3.1 trillion. Isn't it only a pretext for...
I think he would agree that this is a pretext. I think that Frank von Hippel is with you and with all of us in not wanting this war, not wanting American aggression, not wanting the use of nuclear weapons. So thank you very much for coming over here. Thank you, Frank. Frank, this was an excellent discussion, very informative, very enlightening. Thank you.
And thank you for your interest, and thank you for the black hole. I thank you for inviting me.